bakers, welcome back to Love and Baking. My name is Ashley B. Today I'm going to show you how to outline and flood a cookie. Flooding and outlining are some of the most basic techniques that every cookier ought to know. If you can't properly outline a cookie, then you're going to have a different time doing more advanced techniques later on, such as embellishments or writing. If you don't know how to flood a cookie, then you're never going to end up with that nice, truly flat surface, which is your canvas for the rest of your decorations or embellishments. So today I'll show you how to do both of those and the way that I specifically do it. There are two different ways that you can accomplish flooding your cookie. The first way is the way that I do it, and that is with an outline. The second way is with no outline at all. Now the reason I teach outlining is because I have a hard time with icing falling off the edge of my cookie. And a lot of new cookie people do have that same problem. So with outlining a cookie first, what you're doing is you're creating a barrier around the edge of the cookie to prevent icing falling off. If you don't have an outline, then you do need to use a stiffer consistency icing, maybe a 20-second, maybe a 10-second, to make sure that you can quickly outline and then go back and flood. I have a difficult time spreading around my icing if I flood and outline at the same time, so I really just don't like that method. If you're truly capable and comfortable mixing 20-second consistency and it comes out perfect every time, great, good for you. I wish I had that talent, but I just don't. So instead I do it the way that I will be showing you. In terms of materials, what you're going to need is a cookie. If you don't have a cookie, then I highly recommend getting a Nada cookie. And Nada cookies are just these plastic little cookie shaped discs. You could go ahead and practice on them. They're really great to have if you don't feel like baking or if you want to practice a certain technique. I will put all the information for everything that I'm going to be using today in my blog if I have special places that I get it from or special brands that I like to use. But if you have cookies, then definitely use them. I am going to be showing you how to flood and outline on an actual cookie, but I thought I'd just bring this so that you can see what it looks like. You're also going to need a pointing tool. So the one that I have here is from Lily Scribes, and it is a stainless steel pointing tool. Now you do not have to have this fancy one. It just happens to be that this is the one I have with me. You could also use plastic ones, and you could also use toothpicks if you don't have either one. The next thing I'm going to be using is a tipless piping bag. You may be wondering, well, why tipless? Well, why not? In all actuality, I just really hate doing dishes, and so if I don't have to clean a tip or fiddle with all of that, I don't do it. So instead I'll use these Wonderfully Delicious piping bags. They are great. Kristen is awesome. Kristen is the lady that makes these. The thing that I like about these bags is that they have a really pointy tip, and I can snip it as big as I need it to be, so I can control the flow of my icing. Lastly, what you're going to need is your royal icing, or if you like to use a glazed icing or whatever other icing you have. Make sure that you have piping consistency and 20-second consistency. I will not be using flooding consistency, which might sound weird because this is an outline and flooding video. The reason I don't use flooding consistency is because that is just a little bit too thin, and I just don't like working with it unless I'm doing huge batches of cookies. So piping and 20-second consistency are the two that I will be using today. I do have a very short video that describes what all of them look like and you know, what's considered which. So I will not be going over that in today's video. I will also be coming out with a new video that actually shows me mixing the consistencies in a lot better lighting, because the original video that I had just wasn't very good. I apologize, but it'll work for the purposes of you knowing what the consistencies are. I also have a blog post on it, and it gives details about exactly when to use it and why. So we'll go ahead and get started, and thank you again so much for watching. Please, before we get to the end of this video, don't forget to subscribe. I am really trying to post new videos. So I've made my icing, and now I'm ready to frost my cookies. However, there's some things that we should probably talk about before I actually get onto the cookies. And that has to do with wrist position, how to hold a piping bag, and a little bit about the cookies that I chose to frost. So the cookies that I chose are odd shapes. So this one actually, I believe it says cookies for Santa. The other cookie right here is just a round shape here. They have cinnamon and sugar on the top of them, so they look like they're burnt, but they're really not. It's just cinnamon and sugar on top. Getting to our piping bags, it's important if you have 2 sizes of piping bags that as a beginner, I recommend using the smaller version. To show you the difference, here is a large Wonderfully Delicious piping bag, and here is a small Wonderfully Delicious piping bag. As you can tell, 1, obviously they have more frosting in them, but 2, they're completely different sizes. Because if you're a beginner, you want to make sure to use the small ones because you can put less icing in there. When you're first starting out with cookie decorating, you want to put less icing because it fits in your hand a lot better. So this actually is very, very comfortable in my hand as opposed to this, which is not. The reason that I am using this piping bag is because I am going to be doing more than just the 4 cookies that I have with me. I'm going to actually be doing about 150 cookies today. So use, again, the small one. The next thing that we're going to talk about is wrist position. So how I hold a piping bag is I put the piping bag out like this. I make a palm. I grab the piping bag, wrap my hands around it, and tilt. Now this is how I'm going to be icing my cookies. This may feel really awkward in the beginning, but you don't want to be going like this, or you don't want to, some people hold it like this. I found that this is the most comfortable and most natural position to ice cookies, and it's the most common one. So this is how you should be holding it. Again, piping bag down, palm out, take a nice big grab of it, and then just tilt your wrist. And another important thing about wrist position is when you are icing your cookies, your wrist and your arm should keep the same angle. You do not want to be frosting like this. And the reason being is when you make your lines, when you go like this to ice your cookie, you're going to have lines that have different angles and it's not going to look very pretty. So if you keep your hand and your wrist straight, move the whole thing. If you need help, it's kind of, sometimes if you're squeezing hard or if you have thick icing or if you're having difficulties keeping a steady hand, what you can do is just rest this hand against it and that'll give you a little bit of guidance. But again, remember wrist and arm. So now we're going to go ahead and get on our cookies. I'm going to show you how to dot and drag to make straight lines, and I will show you that on the Nata cookie. I will also show you how to make angles or curves, because these cookies here obviously have a lot of them, and that's why I kind of chose to demo these ones. So please stay tuned. So the first thing that we're going to go ahead and do is snip our tip. We're going to use the brown first just because it's a little bit easier to see against the Nata cookie. And we are going to want to snip a decent amount off. That being said, it's always easier to start smaller and go up bigger. So we'll try that first. I always just try it on the side here just to see how I like that. So I actually quite like this tip, how thick this is. It is quite nice. That's going to be a very nice tip to work with. You could do it thinner or thicker. However, if you are getting curling when you go like this, and it's curling up, if it curls up into like a little twist, then your tip is too small and you need to make it bigger. So you want it to come out nice and straight, just like that. If you can't see that, that's what it looks like. So now what we're going to do is teach you how to drop and drag. When you're making straight lines, the one thing that you never want to do is you never want to drag your tip across your cookie. If you do that, just like this, you're going to turn around and get a really ugly line. It's not going to be straight. You're going to have a hard time controlling it. So instead, what you're going to do is you're going to dot, you're going to leave a little dot, you're going to slightly lift up and drag your icing. And place it down again. So dot, slightly lift up, and drag your icing. One more time. dot, slightly lift up, and drag your icing. Now I'm putting very light pressure on here. One thing that you want to avoid doing, and I'm going to do it at the side and it's going to come out as a wavy line because gravity, but one thing you want to avoid doing is you do not want to bring your piping bag really high up, because if you bring it really high up, then your line is not going to be very easily controlled. Let's wipe this off and show you again. So if I bring the piping bag up too much, then say I need, here, let's say I need to go here and I need to go here. If I bring my piping bag up too much, I can't control where I'm going to land. So if I just bring it up slightly, then I could drop it where I need to. And sometimes it breaks, that's okay. You could just either correct it or you could just scrape it off and start over again. So again, we're going to drop, slightly lift, and drag. That's a very nice line. Again, remember, you can always put your hand like this if you are having issues with your lines or your hand wiggling too much, shaking. That's okay, it's very common. Just dot and lift and drag while keeping your hand right here. As you can see, my wrist and my arm are staying in the lock position, and they're not going like this as I'm doing this. I am lifting and moving my entire arm. So now that we've done that, let's actually get on a cookie. Or let's, before we talk about that, we probably should talk about curves. So with curves, say I want to make a curve between there and there. I want to make a nice arc and arc. What we're going to do is where we're going to drop is where our arc is finished. So for here, I'm going to slightly lift up, drop, slightly lift up, and drop. Same with angles. If you have a turn, drop, drop. One common mistake that I do see a lot of my cookie class attendees do is they turn around and put a dot, and then they put a dot, and then they bring it here. You don't want to be pressing when you dot down, you just want to touch. Dot, touch, dot, touch down. Okay? Same with curves. Slightly lift up, make your curve, touch down. Slightly lift up, make a curve, and touch down. So now we can do angles, we could do arches, and we can do straight lines. Now let's get on to our cookies. So we'll start with this cookie first because these are, even though it's a more complicated figure, it's a lot easier to do than circles. So we're going to think about where the dots are. So there's going to be a dot here, there's going to be a dot here, there's going to be a dot here, basically where everything curves in. Now I don't want these dots to show, so I'm just going to wipe them off right here. And make sure to every once in a while wipe off your tip. If it has a lot of icing on it, then you can't get very smooth straight lines. So what I'm going to do is I am going to start right here at this little juncture. And I am going to get as close to the edge as possible. Oops, that one didn't stick. Didn't press down firm enough. And I am going to slightly lift all the way around, pressing even pressure until I get to this next juncture here. Now I can lift up my arm at that point and I could just drop it down. The next thing we're going to have to do is, let's start over on here where you have this juncture here. So I'm going to slightly dot, lift until I reach this juncture. Now I'm going to continue that all the way around, slightly lifting up and keep going around. When I get to something like this where there's not a clearly defined juncture but it's a little wave, then I am going to wave my arm. Remember, we're going to move the whole arm, not the wrist. So I'm just going to dot and wave until I get to the next structure. All right, so we finished our shape. That looks excellent. What I'm going to do is, before I go ahead and flood my icing or flood the inside of my cookie, I want to make sure that this outer layer is dry. And the way I can tell that's dry is that it's not shiny. So if I slightly lift up on this, and let's really hope that I don't accidentally stick a finger in it, you may be able to see that the icing is shiny. We want that icing to be matte. That's how we know it's dry. Now, if you're a little bit more experienced and you want to do that whole no line thing that I told you about earlier, then you could go ahead and outline this and flood it really quickly. I'm not that good. I know that I'm not that good, and that's okay. I'm going to outline first. You will notice a difference between cookies that have the outline first and cookies that don't. If it has an outline first, then you'll slightly see the outline on the final product. Honestly, it does not make a difference. So I am going to wait for this to dry. While this is drying, I'm just going to set that to the side, and I'm going to pull up my round. Now, like I had said, rounds are the most difficult shape, and that's because you have to keep your arm in the same position all the way around. You have to apply the same amount of pressure all the way around. So it gets really difficult to keep your arm going like that the entire time. So make sure to use this guide hand if you need it. With rounds, if you turn around and your cookie is not round, then your circle is not going to be round. There's two ways around that. One, you could use microplane to slightly rub the cookie. Let me see if I have a microplane. So I did have one. This one is for angled edges. I'm not actually going to use it on my cookie because my cookie's pretty round, but I wanted to let you know this is a microplane. You could also use a very, very not used and very clean callus file, the ones that you use for like your feet. But this has just like little ridges. It's meant for herbs and garlic and stuff like that, but cookie people use it to smooth out some of the edges. So if you have one of these, you don't have a perfect circle, don't worry about it, just file the edges a little bit. They come in different sizes. All right, so what we're going to do is go around this cookie with this icing. So what we're going to do, again, is to hold our hand here. And there's two ways that you could approach a circle. You could either approach it from the inside out, or you could approach it from the round. I have two cookies. I'm going to show you both ways and let you make up your mind about which way that you like to do it. So the first way is I'm going to start slightly inside my circle, and instead of dropping my line on the edge, I'm just actually going to pull it all the way around. And go slow. What's the tortoise and the hare? That one story. And cookie decorating is a very, very patient hobby. Again, I'm not lifting up really high, just slightly above so I can control where I land. So as you can tell, I made it back to the center part. As you can see, I just connected them here. Now, the reason that I started here versus starting here is because once I come around and end, I don't want to have a big dot right there of icing when I end. So I slightly bring it in so that I could avoid that, and as you can tell, it's not very, very raised. It looks pretty even. So let's grab the next cookie and look at that. And we'll try the other way. So the other way is starting directly on the edge. I'm going to go ahead and dot like normal, slightly lift up, and make my way around my circle. Now when I come back to this end point, I gotta remember to not press down anymore. And that gets rid of that dot. Now if I keep the same pressure that I use around the entire cookie, then I am going to have a slightly bigger bulge there. And when you flood your cookie, you're going to see that bigger bulge and it's going to irritate you. So these are the two ways. Let me pull this other cookie out. Oops, I just stuck a finger in it. Ah, it's okay, we'll fix it quickly. Everything in cookie decorating can be fixed. All right, so as you can see here, I started from the inside out. Here, I just went from the edge. If you do not like making the borders so close because you're just not very good at them, you could always bring them in slightly and then just put like dots on the outside of it so you can't tell the border. That works too. So the next thing that we're going to do is flood our cookie. But before we do that, I realized as I was doing my nice, beautiful circles that this cookie here was supposed to be done in white. So I am going to quickly redo that cookie so it is in a white outline. Okay, we are ready to flood our cookies. Now, if you look closely, this particular cookie has lost a lot of its shine. If I barely touch it, it's not caving in. It's not completely dry, it's just dry enough for me to go ahead and flood the inside of my cookie. So to do this, I am going to use my flooding icing. This is actually, my 20-second icing. And the reason I made 20-second icing is because it's a little bit easier to control than flood icing. Flood icing, the consistency is honey. With 20-second icing, the consistency is kind of like ranch or thick cake batter. So because I am using this bag just for flooding, I am actually going to make this hole relatively big. If we're using 20-second to outline, I'd start smaller and then eventually work my way up. I found that if I make bigger cuts when I'm doing my my flooding, it speeds things up just a little bit. So I have a nice thick opening right here. One thing I want to avoid when filling my cookie is I don't want to go all like this when I'm filling it, because then I'm going to leave gaps and you're going to see things that kind of crater, and I don't want that. So you could either start at one end and just kind of work your way around in a circle. Or you could go in a big circle and do the outside first and then fill the inside. Now, each person has their own preference on how they like to do it. I am just going to quickly go like this and fill it. You want to try to apply even pressure. And you want to do this relatively quickly, because if you don't do it, your icing is going to start to dry. And once it dries, you can't do too much with it. So I have that nicely filled. I'm just going to come back over here and add just a little bit more. I'm going to get my handy dandy pointy tool. And with this pointy tool, I'm just going to stick it into my icing. It's okay if you touch the bottom of the cookie, and I am going to smooth it around. Now what I'm doing when I'm smoothing it is I'm not only making it smooth so that the whole cookie is flat, but I'm also searching for air bubbles. And I want to make sure that I don't have any divots or craters in my cookie. So you will see air bubbles. Sometimes it's hard to see in the camera, but they look like little translucent dots. There's some over here. So you just poke them, and that's why having a pointy tool is very handy. They're sharp, they point, and you're just going to poke the little holes. Again, doing this as quickly as you can, and then just wiggle the icing out so it's nice and flat afterwards. Now, one thing that you may notice when my cookie is flooded is that it doesn't look exactly round. The reason being is I over applied my flood. So I'm actually just going to come straight off the top and skim some off the side there, and then skim some off the side here. And this is why it's important to have that nice thick outline, because if I didn't have that outline, then this icing that's on the top here would just over spill off of the edge of my cookie. Just checking for a few more air bubbles. I see one right there, and sometimes you could hear them pop, which to me is very satisfying. And that looks like a nicely iced cookie. So I am going to move this out of the way and do my other shape so that you can see how I flood this. Now with this icing, it is also 22nd, but it is a little bit softer, and I could already tell when I was doing the outline. So to work with slightly softer icing than 22nd, I am going to make sure when I apply it, I don't apply it too close to the edge of my border, because it's just going to slide right off. Oh, come here. So instead, what I'm going to do with this one is just get kind of close, but not too close, because I could always go back with my pointy tool and smooth it out. So I'm just going to fill it in there, fill in the nice gaps, and make sure it's roughly even. All right, that has been done, and I am going to take my pointy tool again and just smooth it out towards the edges. Again, you want to work quickly so your icing does not dry. If it starts cracking, you know it's getting there. So just work as quickly as you can while making it look as beautiful as you can. We'll just push over the edges. It's hard to see where I'm sitting, where the edge is. Just kind of guess. All right. Now when you're working with slightly thinner icing, you don't always get as many air bubbles, which is nice. I'm just going to do a quick pass and see if I can look at different angles for different air bubbles. I think we're okay. I have some cinnamon pulling off the top there, so I'm just going to pull it out. Flatten that down a little bit. And I am actually very happy with the way that that turned out. So I'm not going to frost the other two cookies because you already know what I've done. And we've finished frosting our nice circle as well as our cookies for Santa or Merry Christmas sign. Whatever one it is, it's hard to tell when they don't have words on them. So that is outlining and flooding cookies. If you like this video or if you have any other questions about how to do certain techniques, please do not hesitate to DM me. I love putting out new videos. I'm working on getting some more out now that I have a better lighting setup and a better stand setup. But please do subscribe. For all the products and everything that you saw me use, you can go ahead and go to my blog. The link is in the description, as well as follow me on Instagram at loveandbaking2018 if you would like to see some more DIY videos, or if you would like to see some of the cookies that I've done. Thank you so much for watching and have a wonderful rest of your day.